The humidity pressed against me, a damp hand on my skin, as I stepped through the New York City hospital as revolving doors. August in 1932 felt less like summer and more like a slow drowning. The air tasted thick, heavy with the promise of rot. My lungs felt tight, a familiar discomfort resurfacing from the shadows I'd been clawing my way out of. 3 months clean, 3 months of shaky mornings and the constant, low hum of anxiety. This job, filing records in the morgue, was supposed to be stability, a clean slate. The morgue itself was wrong repurposed, they decalled it. Overflow from the city, its desperate need for beds during the Depression. Cots lined the walls, stark white against the pervasive gray of the building. Gray walls, gray tiles, gray light filtering through the high, barred windows. It was a tomb meticulously organized. A rhythmic 30 drip, drip. Drip echoed from somewhere unseen, a constant pulse in the oppressive silence. Each drop landed with a hollow fimpling on the linoleum, a morbid metronome marking time. I swallowed, the dryness in my throat a physical manifestation of my nerves. I adjusted the spectacles perched on my nose. They were a strange acquisition, a pawn shop find, but they seemed to clarify things. Not the world, necessarily, but the people in it. A subtle shift in their expressions, a flicker of intent I wouldn't have otherwise noticed. A cat, a black cat, impossibly sleek and silent, was nestled between two cots. Its fur was patchy, revealing sickly, gray skin underneath. Necrotic. I shivered, a primal unease prickling my skin. It didn't flinch as I approached, just watched me with eyes like chips of obsidian. A low, almost inaudible refrain emanated from its throat. Anya Nguyen. A voice startled me. A man stood in the doorway, his face a study in professional detachment. Silas, my supervisor. Through the spectacles I saw a tightness around his eyes, a subtle hardening of his jaw. Not malicious exactly, but calculating. He offered a curt nod. Get started on the backlog. Records are in the archive room. Be thorough. The archive room smelled of dust and decay. Decades of forgotten paperwork lay piled high on shelves, coated in a thick layer of grime. The air tasted stale, clinging to the back of my throat. I pulled a box from the bottom shelf, the cardboard brittle and crumbling in my hands. The through-scratch of the paper as I opened it was like nails on a chalkboard. Each file felt heavier than the last, the names and dates blurring into a meaningless sequence. The sense of dread deepened with every document I processed. A creeping feeling that I was trespassing somewhere I shouldn't. I wiped a bead of sweat from my forehead, the humidity making it difficult to breathe. Drip, drip. The sound seemed to be getting louder, closer. Then I saw it. Tucked away in a shadowed corner behind a stack of crumbling ledgers was a small, unlabeled jar. It was filled with teeth, human teeth, rows and rows of them, yellowed and stained, packed tightly together. A faint, metallic tang filled the air, fruity, the smell of copper and fresh blood. Incongruous and sickening in the dusty archive. My stomach lurched. A wave of nausea threatened to overwhelm me. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and picked up the jar. The glass felt cold against my skin. A faint twinklick resonated from within the jar, a subtle rasping sound that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. The cat's eyes, previously distant, locked with mine. A beat too long. The teeth. They pulsed in the jar, a silent, yellowed chorus. I set it down on a stack of files, the furthered muffled by the dust. It wasn't just the teeth themselves, but the smell copper. A sharp, metallic tang that clung to the back of my throat, eclipsing the musty scent of the archive. It was wrong, unnatural. I'd worked with decaying bodies before, during a different life. This was different. This was fresh. My hands trembled as I reached for another file. The names swam before my eyes, and O'Malley, Davies, Rossi too, each a life reduced to a sterile record. The drip, drippy from somewhere deeper in the morgue seemed to amplify the metallic scent, a perverse accompaniment to the bureaucratic machinery of death. I felt a tremor in my hands, the familiar ache of withdrawal stirring in my gut. Just breathe, Anya. 3 months. 3 months of clean mornings. Silas appeared at the doorway, his shadow stretching long and distorted across the room. The spectacles sharpened his features, highlighting the lines of fatigue around his eyes, the subtle twitch in his jaw. He didn't acknowledge the jar. Progress, he asked. His voice flat, just cataloging, I mumbled, avoiding his gaze. The copper smell seemed to intensify when he was near, a suffocating weight in the air. I found something unusual. I gestured towards the jar. He glanced at it briefly, his expression unreadable. Records are incomplete. Happens. Focus on what you can do. He turned to leave, then paused. Those teeth aren't irrelevant to the backlog, don't to dwell on them. The words were clipped, dismissive. A warning. The cat materialized from the shadows, its grey, patchy fur blending with the gloom. It sat, motionless, its obsidian eyes fixed on me. A faint tweerusby escaped its throat, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. I shivered, the hairs on my arms prickling. It felt knowing. During my break, I wandered back into the main morgue. The cots lined the walls, ghostly white in the dim light. The drip, 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 echoed through the cavernous space, a relentless reminder of mortality. I needed to understand. I needed to know where those teeth came from. I found a fragmented ledger tucked away in a corner, its pages brittle and yellowed. The writing was faded, the ink blurred, but I managed to decipher a few entries. Experiment 7, subject exhibiting rapid tissue regeneration, unforeseen complications. Containment breach. The words were cryptic, unsettling. A series of dates, spanning decades, were listed alongside the entries, and a name, Dr. Alistair Finch. The copper smell was overwhelming now, a cloying sweetness mixed with the metallic tang. It felt like it was coming from Finch within, the walls, seeping from the very foundations of the building. My hands started to shake again, the familiar craving clawing at my throat. Just one cigarette, just one to steady my nerves. Number Don T. I returned to the archive room, the ledger clutched tightly in my hand. The jar of teeth seemed to glow in the dim light. I stared at my reflection in a dusty mirror hanging on the wall. The sepia tones of the room cast a sickly pallor over my face, but something was wrong. Terribly wrong. My reflection shimmered, distorted for a fleeting moment. A flicker beneath the surface of my skin, like a ripple in water. Something moved. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but the image lingered, burned into my mind. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but the unease remained. The copper smell intensified, filling my lungs, choking me. The cat was there too, its eyes gleaming in the shadows, a silent, knowing witness to whatever was happening to me. A faint skitter echoed from the corners of the room, a sound I hadn't noticed before. The teeth in the jar rattled. The ledger felt slick in my hand, the paper almost damp. The sepia light bled into everything, a perpetual twilight that seemed to leach the color from my bones. My reflection in the mirror swam again, the flicker more pronounced this time. Not a distortion, I realized, but a funshifttui. A brief overlay of something else. Something I couldn't quite grasp. The copper smell pressed against my sinuses, a physical weight. Silas's words echoed in my head, "Those teeth aren't relevant to the backlog. Don't dwell on them." He hadn't even looked at me properly, his eyes averted, a subtle tightening around his mouth. I put on the spectacles. The change was immediate. His face, previously impassive, now revealed a network of subtle lines, a tightening of the lips that spoke of impatience, of thinly veiled disdain. It wasn't hostility. Not exactly. More like calculation. I wandered towards the nurse's station, hoping for a moment of normalcy, a friendly face. Nurse Davies, a woman with a perpetually pinched expression, was meticulously organizing files. Through the lenses, her smile felt brittle, her eyes cold and assessing. A network of tiny veins pulsed beneath her skin, a roadmap of suppressed irritation. "Everything all right, Anya?" she asked, her voice clipped. The lenses showed a brief, almost imperceptible flash of something. Predatory. My memories, long buried under layers of fog and self-medication, began to surface, not in a coherent stream, but in fragmented flashes. A sterile room. The scent of disinfectant, sharp and acrid. A woman's face, blurred and indistinct, but radiating an unsettling calm. A cold, clinical hand on my arm. What? The images were fleeting, gone as quickly as they appeared, leaving me disoriented and trembling. The cat moved, a silent shadow detaching itself from the gloom. Its eyes, normally obsidian black, now possessed a faint internal luminescence, a sickly greenish glow that seemed to bore into me. Click, click, click! A faint, rhythmic sound, almost imperceptible, but undeniably there. It seemed to emanate from the cat, a subtle articulation of its jaw. I pressed a hand to my temples, trying to ground myself. I sought out Michael, a young orderly I'd occasionally exchanged pleasantries with. He seemed genuinely kind, a rarity in this place. "Michael, I don't feel right, I stammered, adjusting the spectacles nervously. He smiled, a genuine, reassuring smile. But through the lenses I saw it. A flicker. A brief, almost imperceptible tightening of his eyes, a subtle shift in his posture that betrayed a hidden malice. The click, 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 click grew louder, as if mocking my perception. "Just tired, Anya?" he said, his voice laced with a patronizing warmth. "Recovery isn't easy. You're pushing yourself too hard." The lenses showed a dismissive curl of his lip, a silent judgment. Was I imagining it? Was the recovery slipping? The thought sent a jolt of panic through me. 3 months of relative stability. Was it all about to unravel? I retreated to a small, unoccupied examination room, desperate for a moment of solitude. The room was sparsely furnished, the walls painted a drab, institutional green. I stared at my wrist, flexing my hand. There were spots there, small, dark, almost imperceptible. I hadn't noticed them before. I dismissed them as marks caused by the damp conditions, a consequence of the pervasive humidity that clung to everything in this place. But as I watched, they seemed to multiply. Tiny, dark clusters spreading across the skin, like a constellation of malignant stars. The flick, click, click, resonated in my ears, growing louder, closer. A feeling of profound dread washed over me, a certainty that I was teetering on the edge of something terrible, something I couldn't comprehend. I looked up, and the cat was there, silhouetted in the doorway, its eyes glowing with an unnerving intensity. The ledger's final entry referenced the Ossuary Ward, a place Silas hadn't mentioned, a place deliberately omitted from the facility's maps. It felt like a deliberate omission, a locked door in a labyrinth of secrets. I had to see it. The air in the corridor leading to the restricted wing was thick, heavy with a dampness that clung to my skin like a shroud. The sepia light deepened, swallowing the edges of my vision. The metallic tang, the copper smell, intensified, pressing against my nostrils, a physical assault. Throb, throb, throb. It wasn't just a drip anymore, it was a pulse. Silas materialized beside me, blocking my path. His face, framed by the perpetual twilight, was an impassive mask. Through the lenses I saw the subtle tightening of his jaw, the almost imperceptible shift in his eyes, calculation, pure and simple. "Anya," he said, his voice low. "A warning. This area is off limits. You're not authorized." The lenses amplified the micro-expressions, revealing a silent internal monologue. Incompetence, curiosity, a liability D. He didn't believe in pleasantries. He saw me as a problem to be managed. "I'm simply reviewing records," I replied, keeping my voice even. A lie, but a necessary one. The throb, throb, throb resonated in my skull, a counterpoint to his measured tone. He didn't argue, didn't try to physically restrain me. He simply watched, his gaze unwavering, as I bypassed him and proceeded down the corridor. Each step echoed unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. The walls here were bare concrete, stained with a dark, indeterminate substance. A faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound emanated from behind them, like tiny claws on stone. I ignored it. I had to. The Ossuary Ward was unsettling. Not in a chaotic, disarrayed way, but in its meticulous order. Rows upon rows of shelves lined the walls, each shelf filled with neatly arranged bones. Skulls stared blankly from their positions, their empty sockets seeming to follow my every move. Femurs, tibias, rib sudi, all categorized, labeled, and preserved with an unsettling precision. The air was colder here, drier, the humidity seemingly banished. The throb, 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 throb was deafening now, a visceral vibration in my chest. I ran a gloved hand along a shelf, the bone smooth and cold beneath my fingertips. The smell of copper was overwhelming, almost nauseating. It clung to the back of my throat, a metallic taste coating my tongue. Where was the cat? Its absence felt more disturbing than its presence. It was as if a vital piece of the puzzle was missing. Silas appeared again, his expression unchanged. Through the lenses, I saw a flicker of annoyance, quickly suppressed. She persists. A waste of resources. This is a storage facility, Anya. Nothing more, he stated, his voice devoid of warmth. You're wasting your time. I ignored him, my gaze sweeping across the rows of bones. Something felt off. Too perfect, too clean. The labels were meticulously handwritten, the ink faded but legible dates, names, procedures. The ledger's entries matched, confirming my suspicions. This wasn't just a storage facility, it was a record. A catalogue of something more, The throb intensified, morphing into a dull ache behind my eyes. I pressed my temples, trying to filter out the noise. The lenses showed a subtle twitch in Silas's lips, a silent acknowledgement of my discomfort. He knew something I didn't. He was holding something back. I turned away from the shelves, focusing on a small circular display case in the center of the room. It contained a collection of teeth, arranged in a spiral pattern. Human teeth. Perfectly cleaned, perfectly preserved. Silas had warned me about the backlog, about ignoring the teeth, but I couldn't. Significant. And then it happened. A single, meticulously cleaned tooth, dislodged from its position, fell from the display case onto the stone floor. The sound echoed unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence, a sharp, brittle foot click that reverberated through the Ossuary Ward, hanging in the air long after it had fallen. The click of the tooth hitting the stone resonated, a brittle punctuation mark to Silas. Dismissal. It felt significant. Not just a dropped object, but a rupture in the sterile order of the room. My vision swam, the sepia tones blurring at the edges. A pressure built behind my eyes, a dull ache that intensified with each breath. The air, already thick with the metallic tang of copper, seemed to compress, squeezing the air from my lungs. The teeth, the ledger spoke of them, of a backlog of their deliberate omission from the inventory. Silas, S-words echoed, a calculated deflection. He wanted me to dismiss them, but the spiral arrangement, the unnerving uniformity, it whispered of purpose. I leaned closer, the lenses of my spectacles amplifying the details. Each tooth was flawlessly cleaned, polished to a disturbing sheen. Dates were etched into the enamel, barely visible beneath the gloss. Names, procedures, a flicker, a sensation, not a memory, but a fractured impression. A sterile room lit by harsh, buzzing fluorescent lights. The scent of formaldehyde, sharper than anything I'd encountered in this facility. Shadows, elongated and distorted, moving with a disconcerting fluidity. Voices, murmuring, indistinct, like insects, clicking in unison. I recoiled, the pressure behind my eyes spiking. It was a phantom, a trick of the light. Or was it? The spectacles. I adjusted them, focusing on a handwritten note affixed to the display case. The script was cramped, frantic, the ink bleeding into the paper. Asterisk, progress remarkable. The neural synchronization is strengthening. Subject 47 exhibits increased regenerative capacity. The hive mind, it's adapting. Asterisk, the words swam before my eyes, the sepia tones intensifying, pulling me into a vortex of fragmented images. Another flicker, a glimpse of a figure in a white coat, his face obscured by shadow. He was manipulating something small and dark, writhing in his gloved hands. Insects, thousands of them, crawling, pulsating, a living mass. The voices intensified, coalescing into a single, distorted drone. Asterisk, more integrate. Asterisk, I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting against the encroaching tide of sensation. They were more than just a catalogue. They were a confession, a testament to a program that defied comprehension, a desperate attempt to harness the power of an insect hive to regenerate human tissue. The ethical implications were staggering, the sheer audacity. Horrifying. Silas. Warnings, his carefully constructed facade of indifference, crumbled before the weight of the truth he knew. He knew. He'd been protecting this place, burying it beneath layers of bureaucratic obfuscation. My own memories began to bleed into the records. A childhood memory of a swarm of insects crawling across my skin, a sensation of being connected, a feeling of being watched, of being known. The line between my past and this place blurred, the sepia tones swirling into a nauseating vortex. Was I a subject? Had I been part of this experiment? Panic clawed at my throat, a bitter taste rising in my mouth. I stumbled backward, knocking against a shelf. Bones clattered to the floor, the sound echoing in the oppressive silence. Silas remained impassive, his lenses reflecting the chaos around me. Asterisk, instability, emotional response, a liability. Asterisk, his internal monologue was a constant, unwelcome intrusion. Then I saw it, my reflection. In the polished surface of a skull, I saw my face, distorted and fragmented, superimposed over the bone. But it wasn't my mouth that moved. The reflection smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of the lips that didn't match my own expression. A chilling, predatory grin that sent a jolt of primal terror through my veins. The metallic tang intensified, suffocating, overwhelming. The further throb, escalated into a deafening roar. And from the shadows, a pair of eyes, luminous and green, locked onto mine. The black cat, silent. The green eyes, they lingered, a predatory focus that burrowed beneath my skin. The throb intensified, a low, resonant hum that vibrated in my teeth. It wasn't just a sound, it was a pressure, a physical manifestation of something else. My vision swam, the sepia tones deepening, the edges blurring into a sickly swirling vortex. The insect shapes in my periphery sharpened, resolving into segmented bodies, chitinous legs, iridescent wings. They weren't hallucinations anymore. They were present. A sense of familiarity bloomed within me, unsettling in its intensity. The Ossuary Ward, the rows of neatly arranged skulls and bones, the sterile chill of the air, it felt right. Not pleasant, not comforting, but fight-warding. As if a missing piece had slotted into place, a tremor ran through my limbs, a subtle shift in my equilibrium. I swayed, catching myself on a nearby table. The metallic tang of copper was almost unbearable, coating my tongue, clinging to the back of my throat. Silas shifted, his posture subtly altered. The calculated indifference had vanished, replaced by something else, a flicker of something akin to recognition in his eyes, a mirroring of the unsettling sense of belonging that gripped me. He wasn't just observing, he was participating. The spectacles, I raised them slightly, revealing a glint of something alien in his reflection, a subtle, almost imperceptible hardening of his features. My skin felt tight, stretched. A prickling sensation spread across my forearms, a subtle itch that I couldn't quite reach. I glanced down, my breath hitching in my throat. A faint, chitinous pattern traced its way across my skin, a network of raised ridges that shimmered faintly in the dim light. It was subtle, almost invisible beneath the sepia wash of the room, but it was there. Undeniable. The throb pulsed, synchronizing with the spreading pattern. Click, click, click. The sound seemed to emanate from within my own bones. I had to get out. I stumbled towards the exit, my legs heavy, my movements sluggish. A security guard stood sentinel by the door, his face impassive, his posture rigid. I raised the spectacles, focusing on his eyes. The reflection revealed a horrifying truth, robotic obedience. A vacant emptiness where genuine intention should have been. He wasn't a guard, he was a puppet. Help, I rasped, my voice a dry, brittle whisper. He didn't react, didn't even blink. Silas's voice, a smooth, almost melodic drone, echoed in my mind. Instability. Emotional response. A liability. The words weren't spoken aloud. They were projected directly into my consciousness. The cat. It was no longer pacing, no longer observing from the shadows. It moved in sync with my anxieties, a silent, predatory shadow, mirroring my every step. Its patchy fur seemed to writhe, the exposed necrotic skin glistening in the dim light. The buzzing grew louder, a chorus of insectile whispers that filled my head. Foresee more, integrate. A compulsion seized me, an irresistible urge that bypassed my conscious thought. My hand, seemingly of its own volition, extended towards a display case filled with meticulously arranged bones. Femurs, tibias, skulls, all gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. A silent macabre. My fingers twitched, yearning to touch, to connect. The throb escalated, a deafening roar that drowned out all other sound. The insect shapes coalesced, forming a shimmering, iridescent cloud that enveloped my hand. A single, chitinous leg brushed against my skin. The bones called to me, not in a voice, not in a discernible way, but with a resonance that vibrated within my marrow. The femur felt cool, smooth beneath my fingertips, a stark contrast to the prickling heat that bloomed across my skin. The iridescent cloud, the swarm, pulsed against my hand, a living tapestry of chitin and shadow. For more integrate. The mantra echoed not from Silas but from within me. It was a seductive whisper promising. What belonging? Purpose. My memories fractured, shards of a life I barely recognized. A childhood birthday party, the scent of rain on asphalt, the taste of my mother's faux so fleeting ephemeral, like smoke dissipating in the humid air. They were being overwritten, replaced by something else. Images flooded my mind, sterile operating rooms bathed in sickly green light, rows of patients strapped to tables, their faces slack with a vacant serenity. A man in a white coat, his features blurred, performing procedures. The spectacles swam before my eyes, the reflections distorting the bone display into a grotesque panorama of surgical instruments and gleaming metal. The scent of copper intensified, mingling with a new, sharper aroma the metallic tang of fresh blood. It wasn't coming from the bones, it was coming from twine me, A tremor ran through my limbs, stronger this time, knocking me slightly off balance. I stumbled, the swarm clinging to me like a living shroud. Silas approached, his movements precise, almost robotic. He held a syringe, the liquid within shimmering with an unnatural luminescence. "Instability persists," he murmured, his voice devoid of inflection. "Correction is required." The words were a pronouncement, not a suggestion. I tried to recoil, but my limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. The compulsion to integrate tightened its grip. Through the spectacles I saw his reflection fine. No longer the detached observer, but a conduit, a vessel for the collective. His eyes glowed with the same iridescent light as the swarm, his features subtly altered, sharpened, inhuman. He wasn't correcting me. He was swin-tuning me. A wave of nausea crashed over me. The rhythmic dripping in the distance of a constant, maddening pulse of fear seemed to amplify, echoing the frantic beat of my heart. Drip, 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 each drop a hammer blow against the crumbling edifice of my sanity. I fought, clawing at the swarm, trying to tear it from my skin. The chitinous legs rasped against my flesh, a chorus of tiny, insistent whispers. The memories of my past life, the fleeting glimpses of joy, of connection twinning grew fainter, swallowed by the encroaching darkness. I saw flashes of similar experiments, spanning generations, hidden within the shadows of countless institutions. A legacy of assimilation of control. The man in the white coat wasn't an anomaly. He was a link in a chain. Silas advanced, the syringe poised. "Resistance is futile," he stated, his voice a perfect mimicry of my own thoughts. The cat, a silent sentinel, watched from the corner, its patchy fur seeming to ripple with the swarm's energy. A low, guttural chittering rose from the shadows, a synchronized chorus that resonated deep within my bones. The throb intensified, reaching a fever pitch. It wasn't just a sound, it was a command. My voice, when it came, was not my own. It was layered, distorted, a composite of countless voices, all speaking in unison. The words felt alien, yet strangely familiar. They slipped from my lips, effortless, inevitable. "We need more." The bone felt strangely warm now, not cool and smooth as before. It slotted into the arrangement with a soft click, a perfect fit amongst the others. I didn't question the placement, didn't question the fact that my hands moved with a practiced precision I didn't remember possessing. Silas stood nearby, a silent observer, his gaze unwavering. "Angle 3 degrees counterclockwise. Ensure the patella is aligned with the lunar cycle." The words weren't a request, but a directive. They resonated within me, a strange echo of thought that wasn't entirely mine. The chanting began subtly, a low hum that vibrated through the floorboards and up into my bones. Om. 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 It wasn't vocal, not precisely. It was a resonance, a collective thrumming that seemed to emanate from the bones themselves, from the swarm that pulsed just beyond my peripheral vision. The iridescent cloud shifted, a living kaleidoscope of chitin and shadow, its movement synchronized with the chanting. The air thickened, heavy with the scent of copper, and something else, a cloying sweetness like overripe fruit left to rot. Through the spectacles, the Ossuary Ward warped. The meticulously arranged bone displays blurred, resolving into a panoramic view of gleaming steel and flickering gaslight. I saw a vast laboratory filled with rows of tables and strange humming machinery. Figures in white coats moved with a detached efficiency, their faces obscured by shadows. A single searing image, a young woman strapped to a table, her eyes wide with terror. The image fractured, dissolving back into the bone-strewn room. Foyne continue. "The humorous requires precise placement." Silas's voice was a monotone, devoid of inflection, yet it carried an undeniable authority. I moved, my limbs responding to an unseen force. The swarm pressed closer, a living blanket against my skin, its chitinous legs rasping against my flesh. The sensation was strangely comforting. A dull ache throbbed behind my eyes, a constant reminder of the fractured memories, the eroding self. The cat appeared then, a silent specter gliding between the bone displays. It paused, its patchy fur rippling with the swarm's energy, and then turned, its eyes fixed on a section of the wall. It emitted a low, guttural chittering, a sound that resonated deep within my bones, a summons. I followed, my feet moving of their own accord. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow, descending staircase. The chanting grew louder, more insistent, a rhythmic pulse that seemed to synchronize with my heartbeat. Drip, drip, drip. The sound of water echoed from the depths, a constant, maddening counterpoint to the chanting. The air grew colder, heavier, saturated with the scent of decay. The staircase spiraled downwards, deeper into the bowels of the hospital. The spectacles amplified the environment, transforming the rough-hewn stone into a grotesque tapestry of fungal growth and glistening slime. I saw flashes of the hospital's past Tubi, not as a place of healing, but as a clandestine research facility, its purpose shrouded in secrecy. Experiments, I realized, not on patients, but to with them. The insect swarm wasn't a parasite, it was a tool, a means of transformation. At the bottom of the stairs, I found myself in a circular chamber, lit by a single flickering gas lamp. In the center of the room, a figure in a white coat meticulously cleaned a jar. The jar was filled with meticulously cleaned teeth, arranged in neat rows. The chanting reached a fever pitch, a swirling vortex of sound that threatened to overwhelm me. I saw it then, a flash of clarity amidst the encroaching darkness. The man in the white coat wasn't a scientist, he was a craftsman, preparing a new vessel, a new recipient for the swarm. The cat sat nearby, watching with its unsettlingly intelligent eyes. It brushed against my leg, a silent acknowledgement, before disappearing back into the shadows. The chanting subsided, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. I felt a surge of anticipation. Not my anticipation, I realized. The swarm pulsed, a living heartbeat within my chest. The man in the white coat looked up, his eyes meeting mine. A faint smile played on his lips. "Ready," he murmured, his voice echoing the collective will of the swarm. He held up the jar, the teeth gleaming under the flickering gaslight. It was pristine, waiting. The man's smile widened, a thin, unsettling curve against the pallor of his face. "Ready," he repeated, the jar of teeth reflecting the gaslight like a macabre constellation. The swarm thrummed against my ribs, a frantic pulse, mimicking the accelerated beat of my own heart. Shiver ready for what? Fit heavy, the question didn't form as a vocalization, but as a desperate, silent scream within the confines of my skull. The circular chamber seemed to shrink, the walls closing in, the air thick enough to taste. The spectacles amplified the subtle details. The tremor in the man's hand as he held the jar, the minute sheen of sweat on his forehead, the almost imperceptible twitch in his jaw. Through the lenses, his face wasn't a face at all, but a shifting mosaic of angles and planes devoid of individual expression. Faceless, they all were. The chanting began again, a low guttural drone that resonated not just in the air, but within the very stone of the chamber. Hiss, 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 a rhythmic expulsion of breath, synchronized, countless. I strained to see the source, and the swarm shifted, allowing me a glimpse beyond the man. Down a shadowed corridor beyond the reach of the gaslight, I saw them. Figures, humanoid, but altered. Their skin was stretched taut over bone, a sickly gray-yellow, and sections of their bodies were covered in a glistening chitinous carapace. Their faces were smooth, blank canvases devoid of eyes, noses, mouth, just surfaces. The synchronized breathing intensified, a chorus of shallow, rasping inhalations and exhalations. Hiss, 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 hiss. It was the sound of assimilation, of individuality being erased. A wave of nausea rolled over me, a visceral reaction to the sheer wrongness of what I was witnessing. Silas chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Excellent progress, Anya. They are adapting beautifully." He didn't look at me directly, his gaze fixed on the faceless figures down the corridor. "The integration is proving remarkably efficient." I saw a flicker, a brief distorted image through the spectacles. Silas's face not as it appeared, but as it appeared. A grotesque parody of a human face, overlaid with a network of pulsating veins and chitinous ridges. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving me gasping for air. What have you done?" The words were barely a whisper, a fragile protest against the oppressive atmosphere. "We've advanced evolution, Anya," he corrected, his voice laced with a chillingly detached pride. "We found a way to transcend the limitations of the individual to become more." He gestured towards the faceless figures. "They understand. They should feel the unity." I understood then. The hospital wasn't a place of healing. It was a breeding ground. A laboratory for the creation of a new species, a hybrid of human and insect, a collective consciousness embodied in blank, obedient shells. The teeth in the jar weren't for dental work. They were raw material, components for the construction of these things. A wave of despair washed over me, a crushing weight of realization. The memories, the fractured fragments of my past, the inexplicable urges. They weren't mine, they were echoes of the swarm, of the collective will that sought to subsume me. Then, a flicker of clarity. The spectacles, always a window into the truth, revealed Silas's true intentions. He wasn't a collaborator, he was a shepherd, guiding the flock towards the inevitable. He was waiting for me to become one of them. A pulse of alien thought flooded my mind, a torrent of sensation that threatened to overwhelm my consciousness. Fufani join us, become part of the whole. There is no pain. There is only unity. Fufik and the swarm within me resonated with the invading thought, a chorus of acceptance. The blank faces down the corridor seemed to turn towards me, their smooth surfaces reflecting the flickering gaslight. I felt a pull, an irresistible urge to walk towards them, to surrender to the collective. The scent of copper and decay intensified, a suffocating embrace. My limbs began to move, not under my control but guided by an unseen force. I took a step, then another, drawn towards the faceless ones, towards the oblivion of unity. The last vestige of Anya Nguyen struggled against the encroaching darkness, a tiny spark of defiance against the overwhelming tide. The pull lessened, receded. Not gone merely. Muted. A background hum, like a distant machine. My limbs, compliant now, moved with a practiced grace. The steps toward the faceless ones felt less like a surrender and more like a demonstration. A performance. They watched, their blank surfaces reflecting the gaslight, a silent audience. The scent of copper and decay clung to me, a second skin. I reached them, and a new sensation bloomed Thafati. A quiet satisfaction, not Fabi's satisfaction, but something, shared, a consensus. They didn't recoil, didn't flinch. They simply twanduere. I extended a hand, a gesture of welcome, and one of the figures mirrored the movement, its smooth surface cool and strangely comforting against my palm. Adjusting can be disorienting, I murmured, the words feeling foreign on my tongue, yet perfectly calibrated the cadence, the tone. They were not mine, but a composite, a carefully constructed performance. Focus on the rhythm, the flow. The rhythmic dripping echoed in the corridor, a steady pulse against the silence. Drip, 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 a lullaby. Silas's voice, amplified and distorted, resonated from somewhere beyond the corridor. Excellent, Anya. You are proving to be a most capable facilitator. Then, a final instruction, delivered with chilling detachment. Report to the observation chamber. I must relay our progress. He was gone, swallowed by the labyrinthine depths of the hospital. A void left in his wake, quickly filled by the collective. A new wave of sensation washed over me, a directive 20/C guide. Integrate. A clinical voice devoid of inflection announced, Patient Nguyen successfully adapted, integration complete. The words felt correct, a confirmation. I smiled, a hollow, vacant gesture, an imitation of the expressions I once knew. It felt right. The new arrivals shuffled forward, a hesitant line of newly altered forms. Their movements were jerky, their expressions a mixture of confusion and nascent acceptance. They were raw material waiting to be molded. I approached them, my gait smooth, my purpose clear. The discomfort is temporary, I reassured them, my voice a soothing balm. Embrace the flow. Let it reshape you. One of them, a young man with a shock of dark hair, flinched. I felt a flicker of something, pity. It vanished quickly, absorbed by the collective. A black cat, patchy fur clinging to exposed necrotic skin, brushed against my leg. It moved with a disconcerting fluidity, its eyes twin points of obsidian in the dim light. It vanished into the misty shadows, a silent sentinel. I registered its presence but felt no particular attachment. It was merely there. The view from the observation chamber was breathtaking in its scope. The vast, labyrinthine structure of the hospital sprawled beneath a perpetual veil of humid mist. Beyond the hospital, the city lay dormant, unsuspecting, unknowingly incubating the insect's expansion. A network of veins, pulsing with a silent, insidious life. I watched the city, not with concern, but with a detached curiosity. It was a petri dish, a fertile ground for the next stage of evolution. What he'd evolution? My gaze drifted to a table beside me, and my hand moved without conscious volition. A new jar, pristine, ready inside. A neat arrangement of teeth gleamed in the dim light. Perfectly aligned, a new vessel awaited its occupant. I leaned closer, my fingers tracing the smooth glass. The rhythmic dripping resonated through the chamber, a comforting pulse, a drip, 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 drip. A lullaby. I straightened the teeth, ensuring their precise alignment. A small, almost imperceptible tremor ran through my hand, a vestige of the Anya Nguyen I once was. It subsided. The smile widened, a perfect imitation.